I've had a lot of students that come through our school and very similar kind of background, like, oh, I did a little Muay Thai here, I did some BJJ over here. And then when they start training in the traditional Kung Fu systems or whatever we're teaching at the time, typically, like I said, it's just all the Kung Fu really. They feel different. They're like, wow, this is unique. Why does it look like it's not going to work? But how come I feel even more tired? I said, because you're working muscles and you're working positions and you're putting your body into augmented states of existence, if you will, that you've never done before.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Conversations from the Heart. Today, we are joined by Sifu Arenstein from Spring Martial Arts out in Spring, Texas. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Welcome to the show, sir. We're very honored to have you on and to get to know you better. For some of our students, actually for many of our students, we probably don't know who you are. So we'd like to learn a little bit about how you get started in the martial arts and how you became a martial arts instructor. How did that begin?
Definitely. I started in martial arts back in 1995. Very similar to a lot of the students who I've seen come through our doors. I was bullied as a kid. Many similar stories throughout the world, instructors and martial artists being bullied. But no, I had no training prior to that. Third grade, getting bullied by 5-6 people, and my mom and my dad at the time, they were separated, but they both came together. They had my brother and I enrolled in martial arts, and from there it just took off. The confidence increased, self-esteem, a lot of stuff just started going up from that point. And over the course of the years, I started doing a lot of assistant instruction. Probably really got into that when I was about 14, getting ready for my, or just after my junior black belt, going into high school at the time. And then that's when I knew that I wanted to run my school eventually, my own school. A little bit down the line, I got to work for the YMCA a little bit, teaching martial arts for a summer program. And from there, branched out to a couple other schools, a couple other dojos, continued my training in martial arts through various systems, received rank, and I just kept it going from that point. And now I took over from my instructor, Chuck Cretion, when he retired back in 2019. And I, and as well as my brother and one of our friends, Tim, we co-owned the school over at Spring Martial Arts.
Nice.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So what martial art did you start in?
I started in Northern Shaolin, Northern Praying Mantis Kung Fu. And from that point, started going into Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, Wing Chun, Hapkido, kickboxing, American and Muay Thai, trained a little bit of both of those, and also Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And at this point, that's what we're teaching over at Spring is the Kung Fu system, the Shaolin Kung Fu, Wing Chun, and BJJ. So it's a good combination.
Yes, sir.
And prior to conversation with my guys, and we set it up that way, there was only one other school I'd ever been to that had multiple martial arts disciplines involved at the same school under the same roof. It was Crosswinds Martial Arts when they were around, and they had Taekwondo, Shinshin Jiu-Jitsu, which is the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, Wing Chun Kali system under Sifu Ramon Diaz. And then when Crosswinds shut down due to financial situation, unfortunately, we opened up a new school called Muchuk Martial Arts. It was run by Grandmaster Youngmi Park. And we taught Taekwondo and Shinshin Jiu-Jitsu and Hapkido over there. So that was really fun. Oh, and Crosswinds, that's where I started my Hapkido journey as well, to mention that. But that's how the multiple systems came into fruition for me.
Yeah, I mean, I almost think it's a necessity at this point, and most schools are doing that because you got to fill in your game and understand all the aspects. And
Definitely.
back in the old days, old ways of thinking, it was like more isolationist training. And so you'd have a master who he discovered a couple of certain truths, like in Taekwondo, it's like pivot and extension. And they would build the entire discipline around those central truths. I think in this age, which is kind of cool, is we're kind of like realizing that those truths kind of extend beyond that singular discipline, and they're very important in the martial arts as a whole. And we need to kind of fill in our game and learn everything that's important for self-defense.
Definitely. And to your point on that, I think a lot of social media and just overall the development of the camera system has a big part to play in that, simply because there's nothing really hidden anymore. There's no reason why somebody should say, oh, my martial art is the best, you should only study for me, because there's always somebody better. And they're going to walk into your door one day and you're not going to have a good day. So it's just the nature of the beast. But I really like the openness with who I associate with and who we train with, because I encourage all of my students, just as well as I was encouraged, go cross-train.
Yeah.
Find an instructor that you like. Go learn from them. Learn as much as you possibly can. And come back and show us. I do the same thing. That's why I'm at where I'm at, because I cross-trained. I took my life, I dedicated it to martial arts, and now I get to pass it off to other students, future students, folks that come in from all walks of life, be it a child who is being bullied, be it a young woman who wants to build up her confidence, be it a man who wants to become more flexible and become more energetic and just overall get back to what they used to feel like when they were in their 20s. Same thing. We have all walks of life. It doesn't matter if you're a janitor or you're a CEO. You come through my doors, you're a martial artist. We're all equal on that.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
So, it sounds like you've been doing martial arts a very long time. Like, how many years have you been in the martial arts, sir?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so 95, that makes it what? I think 26 years?
All right. Long time.
Something like that. About 26 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. So over that time, you must have had some ups and downs, and I mean, everyone has their struggles. What kind of advice would you give to martial artists who either are just starting out and how to kind of light that passion, or martial artists who are a little bit more veteran who may be kind of going through a slump in their training and need some motivation? What kind of advice would you give to those martial artists?
For the kids, it's kind of like the new car smell. Once it wears off, you'll know whether or not you really want to stay with it, or if you want to trade it in for something else. And the passion of it is if you really want to continue to learn, the more you can have fun doing it, the longer the kid will stay. And if they're just wanting to be in a slump, if they're depressed or what have you, the open communication professionally between an instructor and a student has to be there. If there is no compassion, if there is no open communication, or open door policy is what I have, where parents and students can come talk to me together or privately, whatever they need in order to get something off their chest. I think that's really one of the things that motivates kids to keep coming back, because they have someone outside of the home that's like a parental figure that they can trust. And there's a lot of excellent instructors out there that have that very same policy. They word it a little bit different, and we try to make sure that we can help them grow. That's the goal. And as far as adults, when they're hitting that slump, you only get out what you put in. Martial arts will give you exactly what you put into it. And if you're going through a depression, if you're going through financial difficulties, if you're going through physical difficulties, like for example me, I broke my knee back in 2015. I got thrown in judo and my foot got stuck and my knee went twist and pop. It was the third major accident to my knee, but it tore my ACL and it ripped my MCL off of my shin. So I had to have major surgery to fix it. It took me 18 months on recovery. But even though I was in a brace and walking around with a cane and couldn't bend over or anything, I was still at the school. I wasn't doing anything physical, but I was still teaching. My knowledge doesn't fade just because my physical ability is not there. And that's something I think adults need to realize. Your knowledge isn't going to fade. And like I said, if you're going through a slump, the best thing you can do, go train. Go punch a bag, go do forms, go do something that's not necessarily easy, but by the end of the day, you stop thinking about all the other problems. And then you walk out and you feel better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get that euphoria.
If I can hop in there. So I wanted to backpedal just a little bit. You were talking about, growing up and cross-training at these different schools. I was curious, was all of that happening here in Texas, or were you, at different regions?
No, they were here. They were all here in Texas. My instructors, Mike Williams, Steve Johnson, Chuck Cretion, that's who I consider my holy trinity of instructors.
Okay.
Chuck, Mike, Steve, they're all friends with each other. Professor Larry Brooks, he's also a friend of my instructors. Most of these guys are former military or security, and they do a lot of different things, and they all came about and grew up together. I remember Professor Brooks and my instructor, Chuck Cretion, used to train over at Wong's Martial Arts with the Kung Fu system, and Larry came in and they just became best of friends, and started cross training. Larry is one of Chuck's instructors. Larry's one of my instructors. Chuck's my instructor. Steve and Mike. It's a big, it's a big mesh of just, I don't know, 80, 100, 200 years worth of knowledge all wrapped up. So it's fun. And all the schools were local. They were here in Spring and then Tomball and the Klein area. So it's all very local for me. We were also part of a group called PCMA, Professional Combined Martial Arts. It was an organization that branched off from the Midori Yamabudokai, the MYB. And what we did was every year we would go to like Alabama, or we'd come out here to Texas, or go to New Mexico or Georgia, and we would have just this huge seminar. We would have 50, 60 schools out there, all different arts, just to cross train. I mean, it really had nothing to do with ranking. It was just, hey, this is what's out here. Look, learn something new. Take what you can learn, take something new, bring it back, and see how it can help you improve what you're already doing. And we did that for a number of years, and then again, things just go sideways because of life, and people aren't able to do the seminars anymore, which is understandable. But that knowledge and that ideal doesn't change.
Yeah.
So we've got seminars being conducted. Actually, I have a seminar coming up in July. On the 16th, we're doing a BJJ seminar with one of my instructors, Larry Brooks, and another guy that we know, and he trains with me sometimes. He's one of our instructors, head of the system for Ivan Gomez Jiu-Jitsu, excuse me. He's coming down from Spain. So he's going to come out here and we're going to do BJJ for 4.5 hours, or 4 hours on Saturday and 2 hours on Sunday. So it's going to be fun.
So following up there, you were talking about the master instructors you were training with and how they all came together and became friends through this. And through that friendship, you get this 80 or 100 years of experience kind of combined into one. I was curious, the reason I asked about, was it all local? I'm sure there are friends that you made along the way. And I'm curious about, we talk to our students a lot about, do you know that person's name that you're training with, right? Like, who was across?
Exactly. And
trying to build up that community and that friendship, because if your friend is coming to train and you're not there, they're going to say, hey, what's going on? Where were you on Tuesday, or where were you on Friday? So exactly about, friends that you've made along the way, and if you have anything to say about that friendship in the martial arts journey as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of friends that I've grown up with, they've moved on. Some of them are in different states. A couple of my students are in the Marines right now, and they'll call me on occasion. They live out in Virginia. A few of our former black belts, they live out in Austin, and I'll give them a shout, or they'll just call me on occasion, or I'll call my instructors, and we just talk. And if I set something up a few years ago, I went to Virginia for a seminar, and it was about I would say about 3-4 months of preparation just to make sure we knew what we were going to cover, and getting the travel plans made and getting out there for a couple of days. I stayed out there for about a week, and it was nice. And when we get out there, the students that were out there learning from my guys, they're like, "Oh, it's you. We know so much about you. You don't look like you think. You look different than what's been expressed." I'm short. Bald-headed white guy, just short, going to Virginia. You know, to wrestle with people. But yeah, that camaraderie and that type of a friendship is excellent, and it needs to be maintained. If you lose touch with somebody, I can understand that. But when you pick up that phone and you talk to that person, if you're really friends with them, your conversation will pick up right where it left off.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, like a lot of the stuff you're describing with your masters and stuff being all really close reminds me a lot of when I lived in Wisconsin, and we had a martial arts fraternity with a lot of masters in the area. We all would get together, we'd share ideas. But it also, when Jesse started talking, reminded me of something we try to tell our students about. It's so important making friendships on the mat, because that's going to bring you back to the mat. Everyone's going to hit a wall at some point, and they might not want to go, but if their friends are there, they're going to go to see their friends. And that's
going
going
to have accountability, you're going to have motivation, and you're going to have people there that are reliable, that are going to push you beyond anything that you think you can do.
I remember very clearly, like when I was a kid, I had certain people in the dojo who were my like fierce rivals, like Angelina, Javier.
Yes,
we were always going back and forth, and they really pushed me to be the best that I could be. Unfortunately, there can only be one, and they're no longer training, but they'll live on in my memory as somebody who made me stronger and built me to be the person I am today.
Some of my best friends are the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember you look into the dojo when you walk in, and you see that one brown belt or black belt that's doing all the high fly kicks and back flips and all kinds of, and they're like, I want to be that guy. And getting to see that every day, I was like, I want to be like that guy. And now that guy's retired and has kids and everything, and doesn't train and can't do the splits past 90 degrees anymore. And I'm like, I'm happy. And he's like, life, man. I'm like, I get it. And then other friends I grew up with all throughout high school, middle school, high school. One of them's a white hat. One of them is a HPD officer. My brother, for example, he runs his own IT company. I work on a pipeline company. It's so many different branches that go, and yet the martial arts is what brought us together.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've been teaching a long time, I assume, as well. And what advice would you give to a new instructor just starting out? I mean, there's a lot of things you can do right, and there's a lot of things you can do wrong as a teacher. And it's also kind of, as much of it is a science, it's very much an art. So what's some recommendations?
The biggest one is understand that you don't know everything, and acknowledge that early. Yeah. You are not going to have an answer for every single question the student's going to throw at you. So you need to be able to refer up. You need to be able to refer to your instructor. Say, you know what? I don't know this. I don't know how to answer that question. Let me go ask, and I'll follow up with you. That, and slow down. Don't teach so much so fast, because all of it's going to get jumbled up and mixed up. I tell my assistant instructors or brown belts that are up and coming, and I'm showing them and teaching them how to teach and how to instruct. I said, we have a basic form. It's like 20 movements, but we always start off with small numbers like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I said, don't teach past 2, maybe 3 movements at once. He said, why? I said, because they're not going to remember it. Said it's too much, it's too fast. it's not going to happen. Guarantee you, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
And
no.
they start learning it, and they start realizing, oh my gosh, you're kind of right. I'm like, yeah, I've kind of been where you're at. It's a trial by error, and learning from my instructors is the same.
Yeah, definitely breaking things down is super important, but also, and maybe you're alluding to this as well, one common mistake I find with young martial art instructors is they get really excited to teach, and they have a lot of stuff to teach. But for the first time ever, people say, hey, put the spotlights on them, hey, teach. And then they try to teach everything they know, like in one class, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And they got the white belt
Sure.
Chinese 720 spinning cross like on day one, and you're like, dude, like this is not, like, you have to layer it, you know, he's not at that point yet.
And to your point on that is teaching someone at their level, their ability.
Yeah.
You could have two brand new beginner white belts that come in that have never trained in their life, but one has a more natural athletic ability than the other. Yes, that person with natural athletic ability might be able to pick up a movement quicker. Doesn't mean they know it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to teach them at the same, but you have to teach them for a way that each individual student understands. How to relate the material is super, super important. I've got friends of mine who are avid hunters. I teach them how to kick, same as you would shoot a firearm, same as you would draw a bow. And they're like, oh, wow, it works. Like, here's my rear sight, here's my front sight, there's the target. Same thing. I taught one of my best friends when I was working with him on kickboxing and Wing Chun. It's like, this is how you shoot pool. This is how you do martial arts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's the geometry of it, and it's very, very cool.
Yeah.
And I try to do that for each and individual person, how to relate it.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
Like with the jiu-jitsu, we make jokes about it, but it's, violent hugging, folding clothes with people still in them, involuntary yoga, stuff like that. But it makes it fun, and that's the point, because then now they're more engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So how long have you been running your school?
Since 2019 with my group, but 5 years prior, we were pretty much doing all the instruction, setting up all the classes, overseen by our head instructor, owner, founder, Chuck Cretion. Because over those last 5 years, he was getting ready to retire, and he was trying to pass the torch and wanted to know if we wanted to do it. And we said yes. So we started picking up the classes. He started showing us like how the finances are working, how the roster's working, how to run the school essentially over the course of 5 years. And he just basically sat back. He would jump into the classes as we were teaching, and he would just do his workouts with us, chime in when necessary for instruction. But apart from that, I'd say the 5 years was a kind of like a prereq, if you will, of taking it over fully. Because once he retired, I mean, he's living out in Sargent, Texas, out there by the beach. So it's good living.
Nice. The reason why I ask is because, I wanted to ask you about entrepreneurship and starting a business and running a business and whatnot. And we were just talking the last podcast about David Kovar. I don't know if you know who he is.
I know the name, but I don't believe I've ever met him personally.
You would really like him. He has a really great approach to business and teaching. He says, martial artist first, a teacher second, and businessman third. And that's kind of how we view things as well. But of course, you have to be a businessman if you're going to be successful in this business. And so what is some advice you have for a new entrepreneur, a new businessman, just getting started in the martial arts instruction business?
Don't lower your standards for anyone. That's the first thing. The way you came up as a martial artist, the way your instructor instilled his knowledge on you and the bars that he set or she set for you, keep them and apply that to your business model. For example, we'll tell new parents or new students coming in that they've never had martial arts training, the common question, how long until I become a black belt? How long till I make the black belt? I can give you a time frame, sure, on average 5 years, on average 6 years. But my follow-up response is it really comes down to how much you work. how much you want it. Everyone learns at their own pace. You've got person here, person A starting here, person B starting here. Their journey might go this way, but then they start intertwining like this for their knowledge and their skill set. And eventually they get to that top. But it's how and why they want it, which was makes them unique. But the standards never lower. That bar never lowers. And that's the first thing I would say. Second thing is make sure you have open communication with your subjects and your parents and your students, and run the business model that way as well. If you don't have that open communication, you don't have the open door policy, people tend to shy away from things. Be amiable, be personable, try to introduce yourself to as many new folks coming in the door as possible. Sit down, have a conversation with them. Don't be standoffish. Don't just run the school. And if you're the only instructor on the floor, you do what you got to do. But if you have other instructors that are assisting and somebody new comes in and wants to get information, if you have the opportunity, go talk to them. Or at least give them some time frames. Say, hey, look, we're finishing up here. You can hang out for about 30 minutes or so. Love to have a conversation with you. Real simple, just something that will directly acknowledge that person's presence. So that way they're not feeling like a number.
Yeah. What are some of the practices, like your most successful business practices, do you think? Like, what are some of the strategies that you've used to develop your business?
Honestly, social media has worked a lot.
Yeah. Nice.
The online social media presence, when I really started getting into it, as far as like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and set it up as the business profile page. And it might be just something as simple as a picture or a flyer coming up, or, highlights to some of the classes that we're teaching. Or I have some of my students, they've asked if they could help. And I said, oh yeah, definitely record them and then send me the recordings, or take the pictures, send me the pictures so I can do all the editing and put it on social media. And that's drawn a lot of attention. I had a parent come in a few months ago. They said, I feel like I've known you forever. I've been watching your stuff online and I want my kid to join. I'm like, well, let's do it. It's a lot different than the Hollywood movies that you see, but let's do it.
So I'm curious.
That's probably one of the biggest things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You mentioned TikTok, and TikTok is something that we have bounced around, and I've like dabbled into it, and it can be really overwhelming. What kind of engagement are you getting on there? Like, are you putting up videos explaining things? Because there's just so many genres of TikTok video.
Majority of the videos that I put up are picture highlights of our classes. I don't know if you have an opportunity or have had an opportunity to look up spring martial arts on TikTok, but you'll see a variety of things. There's a lot of jiu-jitsu stuff. There's a lot of kung fu stuff. There's some things that are explaining what's going on in the class. And I try to keep the videos to 1 minute. I mean, just if you think about it this way, when you send a resume, you have 10 to maybe 15 seconds to catch someone's attention on the first 2 lines. If they see a resume and they're having to flip through 3 or 4 pages, typically that resume gets put to the side until the last resort, because they don't want to sit there and dabble in something that they've never seen before. So you get about 10 to 15 seconds. So I try to keep the videos about 20 seconds to a minute, unless I'm doing an explanation. There, I get some comments, I get some likes and stuff like that, but I have that transfer to my Instagram page, so that way I can put in the hashtags and start building that martial arts presence from Instagram. And from there, it converts to my Facebook business page typically. So it's hitting from one platform to the next in sequential order. So if you're not on one, but you're on this one, you'll still see it if you check the business page out. And my business pages are all public. So you look up our name, you'll find it. And so you never know who's going to see on what page and who's going to see on what page. And then they might know some friends that go, hey, check this out. This is in your area. This is local. That, as well as my Google business page.
That's something
I have a Gmail account for our school, springmartialarts@gmail.com. I've got 24-hour access to it. But with that email, I set up a Google business page. I set up the page where I can go read the reviews. I can respond to the reviews. I can add pictures. I can change class schedules. And it's great how it works. I mean, I'm on the first page in the Spring area, martial arts in your area, Spring, Texas. It's great. So it helps. It really helps because it shows people, hey, this school is right around the corner from me, or hey, they've been around for 30 years. This seems pretty legit. They're still open after the pandemic. Let's go check them out.
Are you getting a lot of your leads just like up on your website from that internet traffic, or are you doing a lot of outreach?
Like the last month, I've had 10,000 people view our page.
Woo!
On the Google business page.
That's crazy.
Now some of them are duplicates, but we've had 10,000 people view the business page, so that's good, and they're all local within a 15 to 20 mile an hour radius, or 20 mile radius, 20 mile per hour. 20 mile radius. Yeah. All right, let's go.
Fast radius.
15 to 20 mile radius typically is where I'm getting the traffic from.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great.
That's great. So I'm sure we can talk more and more about that, but one thing that I like to do as a martial artist is read books and watch videos. It's something that I started doing a long time ago, and something I realized very few martial artists do. Now, these days, everyone watches videos, and you get not to be condescending, but you get those YouTube warriors and stuff.
The YouTube black belts. Oh yeah,
like learn martial arts from YouTube. But I will say, yeah. I will say that like early on, I started reading books about the history of the martial arts and stuff like that. And that was really cool because very few people knew much about, like a lot of martial artists who were very, very talented that I knew in my life knew very little about the martial arts. They just knew how to kick and punch, but they didn't really know how they all fit together, and hadn't read a lot of philosophy books and things like that. And I just ate that up. And I think it's something important for martial artists to do. I try to pass that down to my students as well. What are some of your favorite martial art books or videos? Movies?
I have a library. So, okay. So to preface this, I have a library at my school. It's in my office, and I have two shelves. The top shelf has martial arts books as far as systems and styles of martial arts that have weapons forms and empty hand forms and goes over history. I've got 4 or 5 books on Wing Chun. I've got ninjutsu, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. I've got pretty much everything. The one thing I'm missing is the Taekwondo encyclopedia that happens to be about 2.5 inches thick with everything in it. That's the one thing that I'm missing. I found it at Barnes & Noble a couple of years back, and went literally the next day when I got the cash to go buy it, it was gone. I'm like, no. So, but I have a book, I have a shelf on that. The bottom shelf is a lot of philosophy, a lot of meditation, a lot of history of martial arts. Like one of my favorite books, and actually my girlfriend is reading it right now, is called When Buddhists Attack. And it talks about the virtues of a martial artist. It talks about integrity. It talks about how to break down and defeat that anger when that is welling up inside of you, and you have nothing left except to let it out, and how to channel it, how to have a camaraderie with people. I mean, it covers a lot of different things. One of my favorite books is from Daniel Reed, actually, is Qigong, Internal Martial Arts, and it's great. It talks about meditation. It references the Qin Dynasty. It references the bone marrow cleansing. It has movements, still meditation and movement meditation, just very, very basic, and it gives you a good understanding of the internal martial arts. Yeah. One from my godfather, Herb Mayer, my first Wing Chun instructor, he sent me a book. It's called Zen in the Martial Arts. Zen in the Martial Arts is a book written by one of Bruce Lee's students. Yeah. And it talks about his life coming up and his training with Bruce Lee, and how he developed his own sense of personal self and developed his character. And to that, I believe that's probably the most important thing about any martial artist, instructor or not, is good character. Mm-hmm. The first thing that I want to build in somebody is good character. If you want to go, not to be offensive or anything, but it's going to be, you want to go be a meathead and just go fight, I've got places I can refer you to that's what my friends do. That's what they own. Those are the gyms that they run, because they go compete in UFC. They go do Pan Ams. They do a lot of stuff that requires a lot of fighting. That's what you want to do. Great. But if you're not building up your character, you're just going to be for better terminology, a douchebag. So, and you don't want to be that in life because it's going to reflect on everything you do.
Mhm.
You want to have good character. You want to have a good personality, someone that is very open, that you can approach very easily.
Yes.
And then you want to have that dangerous side about you because you're training, but it's controlled.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
think that's what
I couldn't agree.
that's where you become the black belt, if you will, in the martial arts, is because you have the basic understanding, but you have the mental capacity to control it, so you're able to progress in life.
Yeah.
Like our black belts, yes, the phrase is you don't earn it, you become it. But if they could have excellent techniques, excellent forms, but their attitude isn't right, they don't even get an invitation to the test.
Mhm. No, I
And
couldn't
it's,
agree
and
more.
it's a 3 month, and it's a minimum of a 3 month preparation just to get to the test.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, it's a increasing problem in the martial arts world. People who are learning the skills devoid of the warrior ethos that makes
Yes.
the martial arts so beneficial to humanity. And it's actually making a lot of bullies in our society who are going around and using their physicality as sort of a weapon to like kind of push people around and threaten
Correct.
people. And especially since the whole MMA revolution, that's really changed the dynamic. You know, you used to have to put on the funny pajamas and say yes sir and bow, and you couldn't learn martial arts without that, and now you can.
Yeah, the respect on certain areas is not there. I'll definitely agree with you on that. And again, that comes down to the instructor and how they run their gym. You could have an MMA school, guarantee you go to Bass Rutten school or George St. Pierre's school, they're going to have you saying yes sir, because that's how they were raised. You go to somebody who's new, up and coming, I don't really have any names off the top of my head because I'm not trying to call people out, but there are people that don't have the yes sir, no sir. They're very, very casual about things. They're like, oh, hey, what's up? And all right, let's go.
I've been training in,
It's not the same dynamic.
yeah, I've been training in fight gyms since I was just like, you know, I'm like a teenager, and I have to say that it's very, very uncommon for an actual fight gym to say yes sir. I've never been to one like that,
Yeah.
and I've been to a lot of them. Mostly, and you know, a lot of times you got gang members in there, people rolling in halfway through the class, just grabbing people and rolling with them. Now some of these are a little more extreme circumstances. I'm not saying that every fight gym is like that, but there's definitely a much more casual air to how this works, you know. And I think they're missing out on the real reason to study the martial arts, because like you said, it's those mental gains. You know, you're gonna need to defend yourself maybe a few times in your life if you get unlucky, but you're going to use those leadership life skills every single day. And so that's a really important thing to take away.
And I think one of the biggest things about that is if you can achieve, let's say your goal is to get black belt. Okay, that's your goal. Then after that, you're done. Okay, fine, cool, that's your goal. But all those little belts along the way are individual smaller goals. I mean, if that's not goal setting in a nutshell, I don't know what is. And if you can't take that and apply that to everyday life, you work for a corporate company, or you work for a security company, or you work for ABC company, you have to achieve a certain quota or number or goal at the end of the week. You have to have those little goals in between. You have to have the fundamentals, and there's going to be ups and downs within that week that's going to throw you off that track, but you got to circle back to get on it. Those are the goal settings.
Yeah.
So if I can hop in there, I've got a couple of things that I want to ask, but to comment on that, I've been listening. This week I was on like the Black Belt magazine website, and I found out they had a podcast, and I think they're, you know, six or so episodes in, but I was listening to one yesterday with Jocko Willink.
Jocko Willink, yeah.
Yes, and I loved it. I was just eating it up. Like I loved his approach to, you know, his conversational style and just how clear and concise he was. But something he said, you know, the host always asks, "What does a black belt mean to you?" And Jocko said, "Black belt means you didn't give up." Right? He's like that's at the baseline what it means to me. And I was just thinking about that, and you know what you just said. There are going to be all of these things that come in and try to throw you off, or, you know, present an opportunity for you to step off the path. And
there's always a way out.
Persist, you know, as you were saying, that it's that becoming. And this is something I do not have a black belt yet. And so I am on my way, you know, and so to hear these words of encouragement, I'm always like, okay, like, you know, it is going to happen. You know, there is going to be that week where I'm like, you know, I'm tired, right? But then I have to say, no, you know, get back on it, get back on it.
Something that might help you. Do you know who Charles Swindle is?
I do not.
Look him up and look up his discussion or poem, if you will, on attitude.
Yes, sir.
And then let me know what you think about it, because
Yes.
that's one thing that we preface is having a good attitude. It's not just an attitude, but it's specifically a good attitude. And if you don't have that good attitude, doesn't matter how clean your uniform is, or if you have your mouthpiece, or you've got your sparring gear, or how much you know, that good attitude is going to take you farther beyond any of the material items that can be taught.
Yes, sir. So the next question I had, and thank you for that, I've got it written down, I'll take a look. This is transitioning back to an earlier topic, but you were talking about the styles that you teach at your school and how you started off in this Kung Fu style and then, you know, have cross-trained in these different styles.
Yes.
I'm curious, you know, I've always kind of looked at Kung Fu from afar and thought, wow, you know, it's such a cool system rooted in such a cool history. And to hear, you know, Kung Fu juxtaposed to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you know, how have you felt that those two arts complement each other?
For the Kung Fu, a lot of it's stand up. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, majority of it is groundwork. And there's three major components to any martial arts. There's your forms application, your self-defense, and your theory. Your forms application, it can be transposed into sparring concepts because you get to see how your kata, each individual technique works and why it would work. That can also translate into your self-defense. Sparring is applied concept. And then you have the traditional aspect of just the sport and just having fun and understanding the basic movement. So there's always three different applications. The jiu-jitsu doesn't always have the three, I would say, but it does have sport and it does have the self-defense aspect of it. The sport is what you see typically, not UFC per se, but the Pan Ams, as you will. Anything is just a grappling tournament. So if somebody gets like a deep half guard, for example, they're underneath the person's leg, they're holding onto their hip real tight, trying to get to their back, screwing themselves underneath the person and trying to take them out, grappling. It's not something I would do in self-defense because it leaves your face wide open to get pummeled. But there are gives and takes. But where they complement one another is they fill each other's holes. If I'm on the ground in a particular position to grapple, I should be able to hit you. If I'm standing up, throwing punches and kicks and moving around and I have a larger space I can move with, that means I should be able to grab you and manipulate your body. There's only two things. And I don't really hate to say it this way, but it makes a lot of people uneasy. There's really only two things that happen in martial arts. You're striking somebody or you're grabbing somebody. That's it. You wrap around in a bear hug, you got them in a grab. You headbutt them, it's a strike. You punch, it's a strike. If I grab your lapel, it's a grab. That's all you can do. You wrap your leg around somebody to throw them on the ground, it's a grapple. You're striking and you're grabbing. Those are the two fundamental principles of the art on that. And it's how you express it. What are your katas doing? Do you have a traditional kata that creates a kanji as you're stepping?
What do you think? Because like, I'm a big believer that every martial art has something unique to teach us. There's like sort of these unique principles that they sort of discovered and built their art around. You know, like I said, with Taekwondo, it's a lot about pivot, extension, maintaining a center line, economy of motion. With Kung Fu, I did Kung Fu back in college. I did Hung Gar and Long Fist. And I gotta say, like, I've done horseback riding stance, but like the Ma Bu in Kung Fu is like a different level of extremeness, and it really is physically very challenging. If I had to say the number one game that I took away from Kung Fu was like the conditioning training was like really intense. Like we used to do like 2-finger push-ups, 1 thumb push-ups, and
Agreed.
a lot of very challenging positions. Yeah, so what would you say are like the kind of the unique hallmarks of Kung Fu, and make, it's not just striking, but it's Kung Fu striking, and how is that different from, boxing or karate or something else, when you start integrating it with the grappling,
I think the biggest takeaway that I get from the Kung Fu is how fluid the art is. And if you look at Chinese versus Japanese, as far as the systemic idea of it, you have 1 strike, 1 kill.
Yeah.
Karate, Taekwondo, Kendo, the first movement, the opponent's down.
Yeah.
Because even in Kung Fu, you can still use that same concept, but it doesn't have to be a power-based concept. It can be a redirection concept to achieve the same goal. So it can be softer.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I have. And being able to be soft and redirect, you can always apply that force to it, but you don't have to rely on it to do so.
Yeah, I agree. The thing about Taekwondo too, which is interesting, is it does come out of karate roots, but I think because Korea is sort of in between China and Japan, they also have a lot of Chinese ideas. And so if you look at Taekwondo and the way it developed out of karate, it actually sort of embraced a lot of more of those Chinese philosophies. Because like you're saying, like Japanese is all about 1 hit, 1 kill, that sort of samurai idea where you take out your sword, you cut them in half, and you put it back into the sheath and you walk away.
It's a battlefield tested art. It is a battlefield tested art. You're not fighting one person. You have multiple people that you're going with. So it's like you have to take the one out, go to the next, go to the next, go to the next to be the last guy standing.
Yeah.
And it's not a one-on-one, which is another thing about the Kung Fu that I take away is the way we teach it. Yes, we have traditional forms, we have basic techniques, you have partner drills, but the concept that I teach overall is the fact that you don't know how many people are going to be there if you ever have to defend yourself with it. I have a philosophy I live by, and I've lived by for my whole life pretty much, is if you're ever in an altercation, you don't know how many friends your opponent has, and you don't know how many of your friends are going to stick around to find out.
So, well, I a lot of people say you got to know how to grapple if you want to know real self-defense, and I agree with that. You need to know that. That's very important to fill in your game and round that things out. But I will also say that grappling is not everything because of a couple of things. One, 80% of people who get attacked with a knife don't know they're being attacked with a knife. So going in and trying to grapple somebody, and knife fighting, if you know anything about knife fighting, is very in close, a lot of slashing, even more than stabbing. So it's a very dangerous place to be trying to grapple somebody in there. But then the other,
meant to be felt, not seen.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, a lot of times
anti-grappling devices. That's what we call them.
Well, yeah, for sure. Oh, I've lost my train of thought now. What were we talking about?
Getting in close with the knife. With the
why grappling is not everything. So it is really important, and I think everyone should know it. But it also, you can't really fight 2 people at the same time. If I'm wrestling you and your buddy comes, he can just curb stomp my face basically as I'm trying to wrestle you. So the striking is really, really important for self-defense. I've seen a video of a guy, he took out like an entire police precinct, just like boxing them. I don't know if you've seen this video too, but he took like 35 people, like boxing this guy, knocks this guy out, knocks this guy out, knocks that guy out. And you couldn't do that with grappling. Grappling is really a one-on-one kind of thing. But the reason why it's so effective is that once you get lock onto somebody and you take them to the ground, if they don't know what they're doing, everything is counterintuitive and they will just get easily submitted.
Yes, I agree. And that's another reason why I studied Japanese Jiu-Jitsu too, because it doesn't just focus on grappling. The Jiu-Jitsu I studied before really getting into Brazilian was Shin Jiu-Jitsu. It was actually invented. It was a system of martial arts created by Leo D. Wilson, late Leo D. Wilson. He's no longer with us. Several years ago is when he passed, but he took his martial arts knowledge, Eagle Claw Kung Fu, Northern Long Fist. He took judo. He took any type of grappling art, his military training, and he put it all together to fill in the holes.
Yeah.
And you could look it up with the Green Mountain Dojo in New Mexico. That's where he studied for the most. That was his home. Is the dojo on Green Mountain, or Green Mountain Dojo. So you'll be able to check that out and have a good history lesson on Leo Wilson. But Shin Jiu-Jitsu takes any stand-up art that you have, any grappling art that you have, throwing, groundwork, and combines it. Where the strength of one has a weakness, the strength of the other fills in that hole. And you could call it, if you want, a variation on mixed martial arts, but it's not just a mesh where it's just a grayed out color. It's kind of like a rainbow ice cream. You see the red, you see the blue, you see the yellow, and as it tapers off, it fades into the next color. And so you can see the individual arts in between, like, oh, there was some karate there. Oh, he just did some judo. Oh, there's some grappling. Oh, he's fighting from the ground and now he's getting back up to his feet. So it's something else, or catch wrestling.
Mhm.
And I think that's super important to be able to do that and smoothly transition between each art.
Yeah, it's going to open an entire Pandora's box of things, but I will say laymen don't know really enough about martial arts and how it all works to sometimes parse through the individual techniques to really figure out what works and doesn't work. So what they do is they say, well, if you took all of the techniques in this art, what would be the most effective martial art? And so they'll say, well, in striking is going to be Muay Thai, and so they're gonna just take Muay Thai, and then in grappling it's going to be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they're just going to basically learn those two arts and combine them. And that's what you see with MMA. But the thing is, that's just because, like, it's like, I don't know if you play video games or whatnot, probably not, but if you did, you know that there's like meta, right? And like,
yes,
one build gets just like 1 point better, like DPS or something, and then everyone wants to just do that one build. But it doesn't mean that all the other techniques aren't useful. Like, they're like, instead of doing like 1,500 damage, it does 1,400 damage. This technique right next door in the neighboring martial art. And it's just because that one was at the top of the leaderboard that everyone wants to do that one.
Well, because it has a high success rate.
Mm-hmm.
It has a very high success rate. It's easy to put together, and to each their own. But there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if that's what you want to do, go do it. Just don't think that's the only thing that's out there. Be open-minded.
That is the problem, is that because laymen don't know enough about the martial arts as a whole, they make a lot of assumptions. And so then, I would say maybe 20 years ago, the whole martial arts landscape was really different, and it was much more crunchy, and there was a lot of pockets, interesting pockets. Now it's become much more homogenous, and you see a lot of young martial artists that really don't understand how we got to where we are right now. And they like just started learning Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu without learning traditional martial arts before that. So they don't really understand how these things all go together, and they make a lot of
dynamics of it,
elitist assumptions that aren't really true, unfortunately.
I agree on that. And to your point, I've had a lot of students that come through our school and very similar kind of background, like, oh, I did a little Muay Thai here, I did some BJJ over here. And then when they start training in the traditional Kung Fu systems or whatever we're teaching at the time, typically, like I said, it's just all the Kung Fu, really. They feel different. They're like, wow, this is unique. Why does it look like it's not going to work? But how come I feel even more tired? I said, because you're working muscles and you're working positions and you're putting your body into augmented states of existence, if you will, that you've never done before. You know, form work, I love doing forms and kata and everything. And it's a prime example of what people argue, that the reason martial arts doesn't work is because it's all forms. Like, no, forms are an interpretation of techniques. It's a combination of techniques like a puzzle, but you can take any one of those techniques and apply it. Forms are designed to hide the art. Forms are designed to be two-dimensional. You know, you're going to have a string form and if somebody's pushing out the punch this way or hitting this way or wherever, and you're standing 90 degrees to where the power should be because it's hidden. You're not working just straight up hip rotation. You're working something different. Until you apply it in a technique or you see the self-defense or the sparring application of it, you don't truly understand it. So yeah, you can walk in, put a glove on, put a wrist wrap on, and beat the crap out of a bag and wrestle a bag on the floor or work with people. Great, you have a lot of application there. Do you understand the internal components of what you're doing? Do you understand biomechanics? Do you study human anatomy? Do you know which direction muscle structures run to help or hurt? Do you know which way joint rotation needs to go in order to fix it or hurt it? Do you know how much pressure it takes to break a specific bone in the body? No, you don't. You just you're overzealous and you hurt your partner, or you hurt yourself by doing something wrong. Your arm is tucked up this way. Oh, I'm going to turn into it. No, you're going to break your shoulder.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
You know, you mentioned the kata, and there's obviously a prevailing thought in the martial arts community that it's not really useful, but I have a very different opinion on that. I mean, I've had one foot in MMA and one foot in traditional martial arts like my whole life. I started in traditional martial arts when I was 5, and I got into mixed martial arts when I was 15. And so I have a lot of empathy for traditional martial artists, while I know a lot of the more MMA techniques. And I see a lot of wisdom over here in the traditional martial arts realm that a lot of the mixed martial artists just kind of scoff at and ignore. And it's really to their own detriment. And anyway, kata is one of them. And the original kata, all martial arts that we think of right now comes out of judo, basically. Jigoro Kano, he took the uniforms from the Japanese firefighters, he took the belts from the swim team, he took the Dan system from the game of Go and the famous Go announcer, and he kind of put it all together in the way that we think about it now. We've all just been rebranding it and rehashing it over the last 100 years. And in his initial curriculum, he had kata. And you know what the kata are? It's the exact same kind of kata that you see if you go into a BJJ school and they start teaching you self-defense techniques. Okay, someone grabs you here, you break out like this, and you come to the side and you do a hip throw, and you take them down and do an arm bar. You're putting different techniques together to create a single self-defense. That is the original judo katas, okay? And in a striking art, it looks a little bit different. Somebody attacks you over here, you block, and then you counterpunch, and you go over here and you kick that guy. And it's in the olden days of like Okinawa and Kobudo, but karate, your master wasn't able to sit there and teach you all the time openly because it was kind of like had to be a secret thing. So he would teach you some techniques in a pumse or in a kata if you do Japanese martial arts. And he said, I want you to go practice this for 2 months. And then come back, meet me out here in this little grove, 2 months from now, and then show me your kata, and we'll see how much you've improved. And if you have, then I'll teach you the next kata. And actually, all those original karate katas were named after their master and their master before, and they were basically the lessons of the masters going back into antiquity. And so for me, a kata is it is a routine that you can do on your own to improve the skills that are essential at your rank. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong.
I agree. And I think it's equally important that, for example, when you're an instructor, that you are still practicing those basic kata. Because if you don't practice the basic kata, it's going to get watered down. You need to be able to go in and demonstrate higher proficiency, or the highest proficiency rather, at those basic kata than you can your most advanced.
Mhm.
If you can't do that, then you need to go relearn it. You need to go practice it and study it even more and look at the components of why you're doing certain things to make it better, because that's what your students first learn.
Mhm.
Our basic form number one. It's that if that's the first form you ever learned, then that's the best form that you should ever know.
It's almost like one of the first lessons that every martial artist needs to learn is that there's so much more depth even to that first kata than you realized. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Like they're like, yeah, I know we have a kata called Kabonyan. It literally means basic pattern. That's the first thing you learn. It's like low block punch, super ridiculously simple.
Yeah,
And everyone's like, yeah, I got it. And he's like, no, you don't got it. You don't got it.
You don't got it. You got the pattern. You got the pattern. Yeah, you might memorize the pattern. Okay, now teach it to me. Why is my foot this way? Why is my punch this way? How come my wrist is not, it's supposed to be bent?
Yeah,
I was actually working forms Thursday with our adult class, and I basically tore it apart, tore it up one side down the other, and I was like, now here's the small intricacies of how to make this better. And then when they started doing it, they're like, wow. I'm like, do you feel the difference in your stance? Do you feel the difference in your structure and where your force is going through your punching and through your footwork? And they're like, yeah. I said, you're this big around. I said, and you're holding me back. It's structure. But they didn't realize it. They're like, wow, this is different. Now they try to match it. And I always tell people, once you feel that point of balance and that structure that you think is almost the absolute best that you can get it, memorize how that feels and try to repeat it over and over and over again, and then make it better.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it has a lot of other gains too. I feel like, for example, it depends on how you do your kata, obviously, because you could have more of a modern, just like fighting stance kind of kata, which might have different benefits.
Like a kempo style.
Yeah. But, if you're more of a traditional martial artist and you're doing the low stances and things like that, it's going to develop good leg strength, hip extension and flexibility, things like that. But one thing I think that is really important that's not really talked about a lot is developing focus and spatial sort of problem solving. I get a lot of
awareness. Yeah,
we have a Little Warriors program which starts at 3 or 4 depending on their focus and goes up to about 6. And a lot of parents kind of scratch their head when I say 6 because their kids go to school when they're 5, and when they're 6 they're in kindergarten
or kindergarten, first grade, something like that.
First grade, right? So they're not in daycare, they're not in preschool anymore, but you're still putting them in the preschooler program. And I didn't start out that way. I ended up doing it over time as I started to realize kids at that age haven't developed the ability to figure out left and right and ways to turn. And so even though their attitude is great, they're perfect sit and whatever, and they say yes sir, they don't really know how to use the right hand in the right position and handle more complicated grappling defenses and the kata and stuff like that.
Agreed.
So that's one of those benefits though, because you see kids, I've had a lot of kids over the years who have ADHD and dyslexia, and the forms can actually immensely help them in those areas, developing patience, developing visual problem solving.
To your point on that as well, we had a program as well called the Little Masters program, which was from 4 to 6, same kind of concept that you had many years ago when we had the instructors to help run it. But we also worked with high functioning and low functioning autistic students. And the goal on that is, yes, you would like them to try to do the forms to the best of their ability, but it gave so much of a focus that they could concentrate on, and then they're going at the best of their ability, and you can see it. Although somebody from the outside go, oh, why are they studying? It's never going to be useful for them. And that's where they're wrong. That is what's useful for them right there. Yeah, they might not ever get into a fight to have to defend themselves, but now they're focusing on something. Now they can perform an art. They can get stronger. They can have a sense of accomplishment when they finish something that's very, very difficult for them to do.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter if it's a basic form or an advanced form. I don't care what it is. It could just be learning how to walk.
Yeah.
That's a sense of accomplishment that most people take for granted.
Mhm.
And the outside, we were talking about how the outside looking in, they don't see the intricacies that we do.
Mhm.
That's one of the things they don't see. It's like, oh, okay, well, what's the goal setting? You're just looking at the tip of the iceberg. You're not looking at everything under the ocean.
Yes, absolutely.
Titanic didn't sink from the
And
top.
kata is so much like that, isn't it? Like
It really is.
like there's like this surface level understanding that everyone thinks like yeah, I can go through the motions, but it's like
Oh,
that's the tip of the iceberg, baby. Like that's just right up here.
I was talking to our students in our kids class the other day, and I said, even just the introduction where we're breathing in, breathing out, heading in,
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
ready. He said, they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, you're defending a grab coming in. You're poking into the eye. You're pulling an elbow strike. They're like, I didn't know that was there. I'm just standing here doing this with my arms. I'm like, I know. It's just the introduction. Just, all right, introduction, boom. Or you have the Chinese, the bow, the rake, the back fist recovers. It all has a meaning. This or this bow in here, strikes, pushes, strike. It's amazing how just the introduction, or in the karate, in the taekwondo, where they're stepping out with the wide outwards blocks. That's a move. There's a hammer fist. There's a low block. There's a lot of different things you can take from that.
Well, even just being like present in mind, because like I get a lot of students that's like, okay, Chediya, Chumbi, and they just kind of like wave their hands. They don't really like get into the moment. Like you got to go from the moment you hit that crisp salute, mentally engaged in your body and your breathing. That's awesome.
Very much.
We've taken a lot of your time. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. And I'm sure
Definitely.
gotten a lot out of this.
If you're looking for another book, Jesse, look up The Demon Sermon in the Martial Arts.
Oh yeah, we have that in the library.
You have that one? It's a good book, isn't it? I love the philosophy behind the book. And my favorite story in it is The Cat and the Rats. That's my favorite story. I don't know if he's ever read it yet, but
I've not, sir.
I read it like 20 years ago, but I read so many books I can't remember every little detail on every one. But
unfortunately, I'm the same.
I was an English major and I read so many books in college. And I got to be honest, like I don't remember.
Mine was a psychology major, so having to do the dissertations and the theses and looking at the analysis of what the person's actually saying, and so much information. So much. But I apply it every day, so it's great. This was fun. I would love to have future conversation, even off camera. I think it would be amazing.
I think we have a lot of similar thoughts about the martial arts. So it was a pleasure having you on and talk about some of those things. And we're always looking for people to talk about different things with us. So we'd love to have you back on in the future if you had interest. We could talk about a specific topic maybe.
Let's stay in contact on email. I think that'd be great. And even if one day I ever get the honor to meet you in person, I think that would be great, over a cup of coffee and a chess game, if you will.
You probably smoked me in chess, but I'll let you try. But that's good. Hey, you play the game of Go?
I'm not really good at it.
Neither do I. But
I've dabbled in it. I've played it before. I don't understand all of the setup for it. Not yet.
Yeah, I think it's really, let's get to tangent.
Territorial. It's a territorial game.
Yeah, but it's incredibly simple. But because it's so simple, it's incredibly complicated.
Yes.
But just kind
I think that's why our basic forms look easy, but they're not.
Exactly. There you go. On that note, that's a great note to end. Thank you so much, Sifu, for coming on. Excited to continue this relationship and maybe have you back on again sometime in the future.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.